Welcome. Today we are joined by our Mastering Home Food Preservation team with Purdue University Extension. Today we are going to be making blueberry spiced jam, and the recipe we are using comes from the So Easy to Preserve 6th edition. As with most jam and jelly recipes, this one has a simple set of ingredients. Our fruit, lemon juice to add some acidity, sugar, water and pectin, and, of course, the cinnamon or nutmeg to add some spice. Since jams and jellies are considered high acid foods, we can process these using the boiling water bath method. You can absolutely use unsweetened frozen fruit, but today we have fresh blueberries for our blueberry spiced jam. Start by getting your canner ready. Fill the boiling water bath canner with an approximate amount of water that will cover the jars by 1 to 2 inches and heat to 180 degrees. Have a ladle and second pot heating in case you need more or need to remove excess water. Next, select your jars and examine them for damage, nicks, cracks, or rough edges. Likewise, inspect lids and ensure they are free of defects such as dents or flaws in the sealing compound. Wash jars, lids, and bands in warm, soapy water, rinse well, and then add the jars to the canner you have been warming. Bring to a boil and boil jars for 10 minutes to sterilize them, or use the sterilize setting on your dishwasher. This is absolutely necessary if your processing time is less than 10 minutes. After sterilizing, keep jars hot while preparing the jam. For lids, always follow manufacturer's instructions for heat treating the lids. To prepare fruit, gently rinse and destem berries and discard any damaged pieces. Thoroughly crush blueberries one layer at a time in the saucepan. Add lemon juice, spice, and water. Stir in the pectin. Bring to a full rolling boil over high heat, stirring frequently. Please note that powdered and liquid pectin are not interchangeable, and you must follow directions accordingly to which product you are using. Next, add sugar and return to a full rolling boil. Boil hard for 1 minute, stirring constantly. Remove from heat and quickly skim off the foam. This step is critical as the foam will make your jelly cloudy, but more importantly, it traps oxygen, which encourages mold growth. Bring hot jars a few at a time to your prep table and quickly pour jelly into hot jars. Remove bubbles by inserting a plastic or rubber bubble freer along the edges of the jar, gently shifting the food so that any trapped air is released. Use the headspace measuring tool to measure 1/4 inch headspace and adjust contents to ensure proper headspace. Wipe jar rims, adjust lids, and secure rings finger tight. Back at our canner, the water should be 180 degrees. So it's wanting to boil but not quite there. This is important as we are going to be dropping in very hot jars and we don't want too much of a temperature difference. Using the jar lifter, lift the jar by the neck below the ring, keeping it completely upright and gently lower into the water. If your canner has a rack that can be rested on the lip of the canner, secure the rack in place and set each jar on the rack. Else, lower each jar to sit on the rack on the bottom of the canner. Once all the jars are in place, the water should be 1 to 2 inches above the top of the jars. Add or remove hot water as needed. Cover canner with lid and turn heat to highest setting. Heat until water boils vigorously. This is where having a clear lid can come in handy. Once water has reached a vigorous boil, set timer for processing time of 5 minutes. Do not remove the lid during processing. Lower heat as needed, but always maintain a gentle, steady boil. If at any time the water stops boiling, increase heat to return to a boil and restart processing time. After processing is complete, turn off heat and remove canner lid. Wait 5 minutes. Using the jar lifter tool, lift each jar carefully from the canner, being certain to keep the jars completely upright. Place hot jars right side up directly onto dry towels or thick layer of newspaper to insulate them from the cold counter surface. This cooling step is part of the entire canning process and is important. During cooling, space jars at least 1 inch apart, avoid cold drafts, and do not cover or wrap jars. Let jars sit undisturbed 12 to 24 hours. Do not touch the ring bands or flats until the jar is completely cooled. As jars cool and seal, you will hear a popping or pinging sound as the vacuum created in the jar pulls the flat down to seal. After jars are cooled, check each flat for a seal by pressing in the center of the flat. There should not be any movement or popping sound. If the jar does not seal and it has been less than 24 hours, you can reprocess the jars, freeze the contents, or store contents in the refrigerator and use within 2 to 3 days. If you choose to reprocess, inspect the rim of the jar for nicks that could have prevented sealing and use a new flat to reprocess. If your jam or jelly does not properly set but is properly sealed, you can choose to keep it as is, or you can remake the product following USDA recommendations based on the type of jellied product you made. Lastly, don't forget to properly label jars with contents and date packed. To store jars, remove bands and wipe the outside of the jars, taking care not to disrupt the seal. Screw bands can be washed and stored for later use. Store jars in cool, dark, dry place, ideally 50 to 70 degrees. Keep in mind that recommended storage time for home canned goods is 1 year. If you find a jar that has lost its seal or is showing signs of spoilage, do not use the food. Molds have fingers that reach far beyond what we can see in the food product. And there you have it, a tasty homemade treat worthy of sharing with friends and family. For this recipe and other canning tips and tricks, visit the National Center for Home Food Preservation.